Okay, be honest, Michigan fans. How many of you out there were a little bit concerned in the first quarter? Okay, maybe not. Maybe I'm stretching it a bit. But Indiana could have been up easily 14-0. All right. In the end, Michigan takes control. They dominate. They crush the Hoosiers 52-7. I took Michigan to cover. Hopefully you're getting my selections here on YouTube as a member or on Patreon. We are crushing it ourselves. Well, welcome to the Voice of College Football. We break down the game we all love each and every day with you. Best discussion, debate, and analysis. Yes, Wolverines crush another opponent. And it's the same old Michigan story. They are efficient when they get it going. It took them a little while on this day. And again, they could have legitimately been down in this game by 2 scores. But in the end, they were far superior to an Indiana team that may be seeing the final days of one Tom Allen. Michigan led the series 61-10 before this game started, having just lost that 2020 game. Did the COVID season really count? Okay, Michigan lost that 2020 game against Indiana. Otherwise, they have not lost to the Hoosiers since 1987. Come out on the first drive, and Michigan puts a stop to Indiana on a 3-and-out, negative yardage there. Makari Page and Michael Barrett met at the quarterback. Tavon Jackson and Indiana shanked a punt, and you thought, okay, here we go, right out of the gate. Michigan gets a 3-and-out. They get the sack. They get negative yards, plus they get a shanked punt. So Michigan sets up in great field position. However, that Indiana front seven came to play as well. Linnell Carr and Aaron Casey, of course, one of the best in the conference. They combined on a sack. They threw around J.J. McCarthy a few times in the first quarter, threw him for a big loss, and Michigan had to punt. Then Indiana got some things working with Tavon Jackson at quarterback, started to work on that short passing game, moved the ball down the field, got the ball inside the Wolverine 10-yard line. However, had a receiver open down inside the 5-yard line. Indiana could have easily completed a pass down to the 1 or 2 yard line to get the first score on the board. However, Tavon Jackson, for whatever it was, either underthrew the guy going to the back of the end zone or he overthrew the underneath receiver. I thought he was going to the underneath receiver and either just airmailed it, or they talked about during the game broadcast, wet conditions was obvious to see in the second half, but this was on the second drive of the game, and he airmailed it, missed a wide-open receiver that probably would have barreled into the end zone for a touchdown, tipped by Mikey Sainristil. I missed the name change from Mike to Mikey. Mikey Sainristil with a deflected pass to Rod Moore, who brought it all the way out to midfield, and Michigan was in business. But Indiana held tough again. Difficult field position for the defense, and they stayed in this football game, turned the ball back over to the offense, and that Indiana stop was climaxed by another sack of J.J. McCarthy in this one. And then Indiana goes right down the field again. This time they put Brendan Sorsby in at quarterback, and he gave them that read option look, made some really nice fakes, both faking the throw, also the fake handoff, and fooled the Michigan defense, moved the ball down the field. So the Hoosiers on possessions 2 and 3 moved it down the field on Michigan, and this time Indiana went to its bag of tricks. Donovan McCulley and Jalen Lucas hooked up on a wide receiver screen, touchdown pass downfield, the double wide receiver pass, and the touchdown for the Hoosiers, as I believe it was Keon Sapp on the play was duped, and McCulley was wide open, or Lucas was wide open. Don't remember who threw the pass, but McCulley and Lucas teamed up for the double pass, and Indiana at this point led 7-0, most importantly, also had 22 plays run to Michigan 6, and led in total yardage at this point, 141 to -8. Well, that was your ball game right there. That was your ball game. Okay, Blake Corum down the field became the 10th Michigan running back in history to gain 3,000 yards. His position coach, Mike Hart, is the all-time leading rusher. What is going on with Donovan Edwards? This is a narrative and storyline that we are following each and every week. Had one decent drive near the end of the first half, but other than that, 9 carries for 20 yards. Khalil Mullings was unavailable to play. He has been stepping up as the number 2 running back. But on this day, Benjamin Hall picked up the slack when the game was generally out of reach at this point. But Benjamin Hall, 9 carries for 58 yards. And again, Edwards, 9 carries for 20 yards in this game, was stacked up time and time again. J.J. McCarthy off to a rough start, mostly because of the IU pass rush that we talked about with Casey and Carr. Missed on his first 2 throws, was sacked twice, and then he got into rhythm, and J.J. McCarthy turned in a J.J. McCarthy 2023 performance. 14 of 17, drilled the ball downfield on the money, making great throws. Did miss on a couple throws. Everybody misses on throws. But Joel Klatt mentioned during the broadcast that he thought that there were a number of throws that J.J. McCarthy tends to make in which maybe he's trying to put the ball right on the receiver, and he's not saying that the DB's there and he needs to lead the receiver on certain throws and throws it more back shoulder when he needs to. Again, not always put it on the player, but throw him open. So that was an observation from the broadcast right there. But J.J. got in rhythm. Colton Loveland got into the game, 3 catches for 80 yards, and he was certainly featured on this 1 touchdown drive with A.J. Barner, the former Indiana tight end, who caught a lot of passes there at IU, more of a secondary threat at Michigan at tight end. And that set up the 4th and goal touchdown as Roman Wilson got lost in the end zone. Indiana did not pick him up. There was confusion on their assignments, and Michigan got on the board. All right, also from this game, Indiana could have come back after the touchdown, so we still had a 7-7 football game, and Indiana again drove the ball down the field 2 consecutive drives. But on this particular drive, they had a beautiful pass where McCulley came back to the football, caught it for 37, would have put them deep into Michigan territory around the 35-yard line. But the play got called back. Zach Carpenter, Indiana center, former Michigan offensive lineman with the hands to the face. It was a legit call, and that backed up Indiana to 2nd and 22. They could not recover, and they had to punt the football. JJ goes back to work, and the next drive was culminated by, and it was also highlighted more so by a backflip Brett Favre kind of pitch downfield that was a pitch perfect if you love music. And that made it 21-7 as Donovan Edwards could have scored. So they've got Donovan Edwards in at running back inside the 10-yard line. They gave him the ball one time. And I think in no way that Jim Harbaugh is obligated to give anybody in particular the football. It's not Super Bowl 1986. Walter Payton needs to get the football because he's one of the greatest of all time, but you give it instead to Refrigerator Perry. No, this is not that kind of situation. Donovan Edwards is a strong talent, really good talent, and what he did for Michigan football down the stretch in replacing Blake Corum last year should never be forgotten, even if he never runs for another yard at Michigan. He took over in the Illinois game, and Michigan squeaked out a win. Then he dominated against Ohio State, ran for whatever it was, 215 or 225. Had an enormous game against Purdue with over 200 rushing yards in the Big Ten championship game. Even ran for a 105 or 115 in the college football playoff game. So he took over down the stretch, and he even ran for just under 8 yards per carry where Blake Corum was at 5.5 last year. So Donovan Edwards going into this season actually in some respects looks like the better running back. But we don't know what's happened here. He came into this game at 3.4 yards per carry, and again, 9 for 20 is going to hurt that average even more. He wanted the football. They gave him the football once. He got stuffed at the line. They took him out. They bring in Blake Corum, who scores his 12th touchdown. Poor Donovan Edwards has 0. And I wouldn't bring this up except for they show Donovan Edwards on the sideline. I am the last guy in the world, if you've been watching me on a regular basis, who makes interpretations of who's pouting, who's whining, who's doing this, who's doing that. I do not read minds. However, Donovan Edwards was not whining, not complaining, not sulking. It did not appear that in any way. He looked disappointed on the sideline, and it's understandable. 21-7 at half. And that was really the backbreaker for Indiana. They almost made it to the locker room at 14-7. They could not, and they trailed 21-7. Michigan comes out in the second half. They get the ball first. They go 4 plays, 80 yards like it's nothing. Colton Loveland with some big plays. He's impossible for the average or even a better than average defense to cover. 28-7 Michigan from there. They march out from there and just completely, from a defensive standpoint, dominate the game. The Indiana defense actually played pretty well. They actually played pretty well if you watch the game and saw the plays from series to series. But the Indiana offense was non-existent after the first 3 drives of the game. And after that penalty call on the hands to the face negated the 37-yarder, it was all done and all over. JJ came out of the game at the end of the third quarter. Insert Jack Tuttle. He goes 5 for 5, throws a touchdown pass as well. Michigan had 4 sacks on defense, 8 tackles for loss. This looks similar to the Rutgers game, where Rutgers looked like they really showed up. Now, Rutgers stayed in the game far longer than Indiana. They were in the game late third quarter, and it was still a 17-7 game. Then they went for a 4th down, and then threw the pick 6 to Sandra Still on the screen pass that broke their backs. 24-7, game over. They lose by 24. Michigan more so dominated this game, but in a similar way, they get hit and they bounce back. Rutgers hit him with a 60-yard pass play down the middle, third play of the game. And again, very similar game, similar opponent. Rutgers is better, just defeated Michigan State 27-24. And speaking of which, the Wolverines' next opponent against rival Michigan State on the road. So that's the setup for Michigan football. They survive Indiana 52-7. And we will continue to talk Michigan football. Join us for our Big Ten Live show that we present every Monday at 6 Eastern time. You can join me, 6 Eastern. We take your calls on Michigan and the Big Ten. And, of course, our weekly Michigan shows with John D'Adamo every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time on the Michigan channel. And we do Michigan postgame with John after each Wolverines game, which is 6 for 6 right now in the win column. Again, Michigan State is up next. Your thoughts down below. Give us a like. Give us a subscription as well. Consider subscribing to the channel as a member. Also, you can do that on patreon.com/MarkRogersTV. You get my picks. You get the under-the-radar selection that's 17-2 against the spread as well. Right here at the Voice of College Football.